Good morning. My name is Rogowiecki, and welcome to the Kongres 590 studio. I got a pleasure to have a very, very special guest with me. His name is Dr. Bjorn Lomborg, and he's a Danish guy who's a famous environmentalist, the president of Copenhagen Consensus Center, and author of 2 best-selling, for some controversial books, Skeptical Environmentalist and Coolidge. Plus, he's got a new book out, which is really to be grabbed at once. This is the new book. I highly recommend it. I read it, and it's fantastic. Bjorn, my pleasure. Let me start with what we really are here to talk about. How serious a challenge is global warming to us, to human beings, and how much time do we have to tackle it, to get it under control?
So global warming is a real problem, but it's not by any means the way that is often portrayed, the end of the world. This is not an existential threat, it's a problem. And the reason we know is because not only if you read the UN climate panel reports, they don't talk anywhere about existential threats, they talk about problems. And most of the economics, so climate economics, have spent the last 30 years to try and estimate how big of a problem is global warming. And so the only climate economist to get the Nobel Prize in climate economics is William Nordhaus in 2018. And he estimates if we do nothing about climate, by the end of the century, it will feel like we're about 4% less well off than we otherwise would be. Remember, we're going to be much richer, so by the end of the century, we'll probably be about 450% as rich as we are today, each and every person on the planet. But because of climate change, it'll feel like we're only 434% as rich. That's not the end of the world. That's a problem.
So do we have to fear, or do we have to really work on it?
Well, so first of all, fear is a really bad way to think about fixing problems smartly. But no, this is a problem, like many other problems in the world. And so we need to fix it, but fix it smartly. So, to give you a sense of proportion, if it's a 4% problem, then clearly if you could find a way that will cost, say, 1% and fix most of the 4%, that's a smart thing. It's a very dumb thing to find something that costs 10% to fix a little bit of the 4% problem. And unfortunately, that's much of the policies that we're doing right now in climate are exactly those kinds of things where we spend vast amounts of money on doing fairly little good. That's just stupid.
So why don't people listen to you?
So again, you shouldn't listen to me. I mean, look, in that sense, I'm a nobody. But you should listen to the only person who got the Nobel Prize in climate economics. And he basically points out we should do some, but not anywhere near what most politicians are talking about. And of course, again, remember, if politicians talk about wanting to do net zero, for instance, it doesn't mean that they're going to do this smartly. Actually, we know very, very well that most policies end up being much more costly than they were advertised. And so the chances that we end up spending lots of money doing very little good. I would like to be remembered as the generation who spent money smartly and solved a lot of the world's problems. Unfortunately, we're on track to be the generation who wasted a lot of money and just fixed a tiny bit.
Oh, I'm really concerned about that, what you said. But what kind of methods and measures should we apply to limit global warming, if it's possible?
So the fundamental point is the EU and many others are basically saying we got to cut back on CO2. And that makes sense. CO2 is the reason why we have a global warming problem. So the natural idea is to say we got to cut back. But remember, it's rarely a very good policy argument to say, I'm sorry, because of global warming, would you mind to be a little colder, a little less comfortable, a little less rich? That doesn't sell votes, and in the long run, it gets most people turned off on the message. The only way you're going to get people on board is through innovation. If we could innovate the price of green energy down below fossil fuels, everyone would switch. Remember, this is not about getting Poland or the EU to cut its emissions. This is about making sure that everybody else, so China, India, Africa, does it. And they have, quite frankly, much, much more urgent issues like making sure that their populations get out of poverty and that kids don't die and they get a good education. So we need to be the guys who focus on innovation. Partly, that's much, much cheaper than what we're currently doing. Partly, it's the only way we're going to get everybody else on board.
So bearing in mind what you just said, is Fit 55 the best idea for Europe? Is it a solution? Because I guess we are here concerned, not only in Poland.
Everything is a solution in the sense that it does do some good, but it does only a little good at really, really high cost. And so, no, it's not the smart solution. Fit for 55, which is basically just Europe's virtue signaling. It's saying we're the best in the world. We're so good. We care so much. No, you don't care if you spend money really poorly and in a way that doesn't show China, India, and Africa how to do it, but in some ways show them how not to do it. What we need to do is to dramatically ramp up spending on innovation. We should be spending much more. We're spending very, very little on innovation. That's how you do this. If we could get, and I'm just making one argument, if we could get fourth generation nuclear to be cheaper than fossil fuels, we don't know if it's going to be, but it could be. If it's going to be cheaper than fossil fuels, everyone will buy it. That's how you fix a problem. Remember back in Los Angeles in the 1950s, it was a terribly polluted city, mostly because of lots and lots of cars. Now, telling the people in Los Angeles, I'm sorry, could you just walk instead, was not going to work. What did work was we invented this catalytic converter. You put it on the car, it costs a little bit of money, and then basically the car doesn't pollute. That's how you solve a problem. That's how we should solve climate change. Unfortunately, that's not how we're doing it right now, and that's why we're wasting a lot of money on achieving very little.
Well, I like your ideas, and let me ask you a kind of tricky question. Nobody mentions costs. Yeah. It's going to be trillions, right?
Oh, God, it's going to be incredibly costly. I'm actually going to give a bit of a talk on my talk on this. But, the estimates sort of seem to indicate this is going to cost somewhere in the order of $5 to $6 trillion each and every year.
Per year?
Per year. If we do this very, very smartly, and remember, this is probably vastly underestimated for two reasons, partly because these are only direct costs. There's going to be a lot of indirect costs in the sense that our economies are going to be less effective. And also, almost all climate policies so far have been incredibly ineffective. That is, the $5 or $6 trillion cost is if we do everything smart. We're unfortunately not likely to do that, and so the cost could very easily be, say, $10 trillion. Remember, this is about 10% of global GDP. So one point is, this is not going to bring us to the poorhouse. We'll still have 90%. We'll still be well off. It's not the end of the world in economic terms either. But 10% is more than what we're spending on healthcare. It's more than what we spend on education. We could do so much other stuff for this. Not only making our world better, but making the whole world better, and of course, spend on innovation so that we could actually also fix climate change. So my point is, why aren't we spending money much smarter in a less virtue signaling way, but a much more effective way?
We're on the same page, no doubt, Bjorn. But what I'm struck with is, how will it impact a regular guy on the street?
Yes. So it'll mean, if you try to do Fit for 55, it will make everything you do with energy much more expensive. Now, the idea, of course, is that you will eventually
prices are high.
Yes, but, so it's going to be costlier to drive a car. It's going to be costlier to go on a vacation. All these kinds of things. The idea is that that's sort of indirectly going to push innovation, but it's an incredibly inefficient way. If you want to push innovation, you should spend money on innovation. It's not rocket science. Unfortunately, we seem to say, no, let's make it hard for everyone, and then maybe we'll find a solution. That's not a terribly good, yes, maybe we'll find a solution. So again, remember, this is not the end of the world. We'll still have lots of resources, we'll still be well off, but we could have been much better off. And one study in Nature showed that this is going to cost the average person in the US by mid-century, going net zero, as Biden is suggesting, it's going to cost him or her $11,000 per person per year.
It's a huge amount of money.
Yeah. And the reality, of course, is if you actually start having those kinds of costs, people are going to vote you out of office.
Absolutely.
So the real problem with much of this climate policy is not only is it incredibly inefficient, not only is it not actually going to fix most of the climate problem, not only is it not going to get China, India, and Africa on board, but it's not possible because you're going to get voted out of office. And so we need a smarter way that is less costly and much more effective. And that is, fundamentally research and development into green energy.
Scary, scary.
Actually, it's hopeful also because we can do much better. I mean, that's amazing. Imagine if we were doing the best, we wouldn't have to have any kind of conversation. We're doing dumb stuff, but we can do much better.
Absolutely. Currently observed globally a high level of electricity consumption. How to combine electricity production at the current level with the global warming mitigation?
Well, this is exactly the problem. That's very, very hard. Remember, electricity is why electricity and in general energy is why we're rich. Remember, back 200 years ago, we basically just had our own muscles. We had a little bit of horses and you know, they're draft animals, and that was it. Yeah. You were poor because you had to do all of the work. Basically, we managed to get machines through energy, through fossil fuels, to do a lot of our work. This is why we're all very, very rich. We're basically trying to say, oh, this engine that got us rich over the last 200 years, let's try to take that out and see what happens. That seems like a bad idea. Now, again, climate change is a real problem, so we need to fix it in the long run, but we need to have the solutions before we try to fix it. And right now, we're, in some sense, putting the cart in front of the horse. We're just saying, no, no, let's promise to cut carbon emissions. And what ends up happening is we make a lot of accounting tricks. We made a lot of incredibly expensive things that only cut a little bit. Some of them don't cut anything at all, but they just work sort of accounting-wise. And it makes us feel good, but it doesn't actually solve the problem.
Well, I like the idea of electric cars and wind turbines. But what worries me, what's going to happen when they break down? You've got the car batteries. How are we going to utilize them? Well, it's a serious problem nobody mentioned.
We don't know. And the truth is,
we're going to have that the car is on fire, it has to burn for 24 hours.
Yes, right? Yes. So we have a lot of blades that are coming up from wind turbines that we don't know how to reprocess. We have a lot of batteries that we don't know how to reprocess. Again, the argument is, well, we can eventually find out how to do that. Well, maybe we should find that out first again. And the point here is not to say that this is not something that could be good, but the whole idea of telling people, you know what, electric cars are so good, we're going to mandate it for everyone. Wait a minute. If they're so good, you don't need to mandate it. People will want it. What they're showing off is electric cars, for some people, are great. I mean, I love driving a Tesla. It's fun. But for most people, it's not actually the right way forward.
But it's out of reach financially.
And the way you know that is, you know, the country with the most electric cars is Norway. 90% of all people who have an electric car in Norway also have a real car, and they drive that much.
Backup.
Well, no, they actually drive that longer. So, you know, the truth is, we're not ready to switch over. We pretend we're ready, and that means we're just going to incur lots of cost at fairly little benefit.
The Green Revolution of the 60s, high level, it reduced hunger on Earth, as far as I remember. And now you're calling for the second Green Revolution. And what purpose would it serve? Is it a perfect solution for the current famine, which is hitting the whole world?
So there's a lot of different green revolutions. So the Green Revolution in the 60s was basically we managed to get much more out of each acre or hectare of land. That was a great idea. That was basically a research-driven idea. We should do that again. I'm actually arguing that in the new book because we need to get much more food, especially to the world's poor. And that's about, you know, we focused a lot on wheat and corn. We need to focus also on sorghum and cassava and all these stuff that we don't know in the rich world, but that is crucial for many people in the poor part of the world. That's one green revolution. The other one I think that you were talking about is the green revolution that the Europeans are trying to say, oh, we're going to go all green. We absolutely need a green revolution, but we're not driving one because a green revolution doesn't come from fiat. It doesn't come from regulation. It comes from innovation. And again globally, we're spending less and less on green innovation. Why? Because we're focused so much on living up to our current promises that we don't really have time to think about how we're going to deliver on future promises, which of course is the innovation part. We need the catalytic converter. Again, we need smart innovation that will mean that India and China and Africa will actually do what we would like them to do, namely switch over to cheaper green energy. We're not there yet, but we could. And so I hope that Poland, for instance, will push a lot more to say less Fit for 55, more innovation. It happens to be both much more effective, it's also much cheaper, and it's much more likely to actually fix it.
It's a great idea. I agree with you. Just one kind of lighter question. I'm curious about your assessment on whose ideas are more beneficial for us humans, Elon Musk's or Bill Gates's?
Who would I choose between Bill Gates and Elon Musk? I think we should be happy that they're both there. So I think Bill Gates is basically, I should just say he funded that last book. So I'm slightly biased on that one, right? But I mean, he has spent a lot of his private money on actually trying to make the world better, eradicate polio. We got to be very, very thankful that people like him are around. But I think Elon Musk also gives us great hope with amazing technology. Imagine that we can actually go not to the stars, but to other planets. That's great. We need a lot more smart people. We should be focusing on smart people, and we should recognize the only way we're going to fix global big problems is through innovation, and that's where we could both benefit from more Bill Gateses and more Elon Musks.
Dr. Bjorn Lomborg, thank you much for a very interesting conversation. Hope you're going to join us with the Congress, and good luck with the book, and waiting for some other books of yours.
Brilliant.
My pleasure.